a huge honor today to be lecturing David Rudo, who I've been seeing at every major convention for probably 28 years. You always have your bicycle. And by the way, that's why you look so rocking hot at 80 years old, is that damn bicycle of yours. I mean, when I lecture around the world, all the countries where the people have to walk to work or they walk to a train or a subway or commute, all those public transportation systems, they're all ideal weight. You almost can't find. I'm always the fattest person in any of those cities. And I mean, if anybody says what type of diet you should be on or how do you lose weight, I mean, travel around the world. It's your car.
Yep.
It's your car. A car causes obesity. It's not protein or fish or the Mediterranean diet or any of all these crazy stuffs. Because you go around the world, they all have a different diet and they're all lean because most of them have to walk like 2 miles to catch the subway or the train. And then Ellie drops them off, 1 or 2 or 3 miles. I'll never forget the first time I went to Cologne, Germany, and I was staying in this 3 or 4 story bed and breakfast hotel, whatever. And this about 80-year-old lady is riding down the street in her bicycle with a basket of groceries, gets to the door, hops off her bike, puts the groceries in one hand, lifts up her bike with the other, kicks the door open, and then skedaddles up 3 flights of steps.
That's Cologne.
And I thought, in America, you'd be either dead or on 10 medications and be telling everybody, you have some medical condition. I mean, so you're just a rocking hot role model for me in so many ways, and I've really enjoyed your friendship over the years. So tell us this. You graduated from the University of Maryland in '61, which was the first dental school in America, correct?
And it was still taught, dentistry was still taught the same way when I was there.
And how did you go from being David Rudo, the dentist, to the mastermind whiz kid behind rebond?
Necessity was the mother of invention.
And what year was that?
Late 80s. I belonged to a periodontal study club whose mentor was Irving Stern, one of the immortals of perio. He was also one of the founders of the Academy of Osseointegration. So I got involved in implants. I always was interested in occlusion. So I would make long-term provisional implant bridges and try to refine the occlusion by eyeballing it. And the provisional bridges, the acrylic bridges, would break like acrylic bridges do. So I came up with this material with a lot of help from friends. And I ended up with something that works. And that's how rebond was born. I wasn't looking for a product. Product wasn't on my mind. Product came in later. So from provisional implant bridges, I got involved in periodontal splinting. And it turned out to be the standard in periodontal splinting. It's used for all kinds of things now. The main use is going to be within composite restorations, using protocols that are promoted by the Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry. And I'll have some examples of that in here. So that's where the future lies, in my opinion.
So you brought today 17 slides, and I love this because you've always been a pioneer, and now you're pioneering on my podcast. I think this is like what number is this, John? 130, 120, and leave it to David to be pioneering. This is the first time I've ever had an iPad next to me with 17 slides. So what do you want to be? So you're looking at these same slides on your iPad?
My slides are over on the computer off to my right.
So you want to go through this? You want to go through this first, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, it'll be a good start. And if I get too carried away with explanation, just call me on it.
I'll actually get on my bicycle in Phoenix and ride all the way to Seattle.
Too hot for you in Phoenix. Get out real early there in the morning.
I do. I work out every morning at 5 because I swear by 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock is just too hot. And it's really weird because when you go on like a 4-hour bike ride, 5 to 6, you don't even drink water. 6 to 7, maybe one bottle. but by 8 o'clock, you're like a bottle every half hour, and it just zaps the energy out of you. It's
Yeah,
amazing how the sun works.
I
So
grew up in Baltimore. I grew up in Baltimore, where it's humid and hot, so I had to get away from that.
So are you still a Baltimore Ravens fan, or did you switch to a Seattle Seahawk?
Actually, I'm neither. I'm not much on spectator sports. It's not my
Yeah,
game.
it's not okay. So slide number one,
Okay, let me finish.
How do you pronounce that? Maurizio Grande.
Mauricio Grande. Mauricio Grande is a dentist in Rome. And let me mention this in the beginning. Pasteur said, chance favors the prepared mind. So if your mind is prepared, you may have better luck. Mauricio Grande is a dentist in Rome who's been using rebond. He does a lot of immediate load implant bridges. So I used his case as the example of what I did in the beginning, reinforcing provisional implant bridges. My original pictures were so crude it would take a lot of explanation to describe them. So that's a good example that you're seeing there. This provides rigid arch stabilization that you need for immediate load implants. I was actually the first general practitioner to become a full member of the Academy of Osseointegration back when you had to present cases. And that's what I showed. So that's the example of it.
So slide 2, it says effect of bond line thickness.
Okay, that's a slide made by my mentor, Vistaps Kabari, who was a structural engineer with a PhD in fiber composites. He intellectually adopted me, I would say. When I got started, I wrote away to 6 or 7 fiber composite research centers, and he replied. He's now the president of University of Texas in Arlington, near Dallas. That slide shows the thinner the bond line is, the stronger the bond is. The thicker the bond line is, the weaker the bonds. And this is the basis for almost all fiber composite structures. In fiber composites, it's a system. The fiber, the resin that holds it on, and the substrate, in our case, is the tooth. So that is a clear description of the principle, and that's why I keep pushing the thin bond line. And that's what makes rebond so effective. You can adapt it right up against the teeth.
Pretend you're talking to someone just with headphones on.
Okay, slide 2 shows a graph. The vertical axis, I think, is one of the axes is strength and the other is thickness. So it shows the thicker the bond line is, the weaker it is. Conversely, the thinner the bond line, the thinner the amount of resin between the tooth and the fiber, the stronger it is. And that is a universal principle of laminates. You're familiar with porcelain veneers. The reason they fail is not that the veneer itself is weak, but they debond. When it's not bonded, smack up against the tooth. With an orthodontic bracket, you want to bond it smack up against the tooth. There was a poster clinic at the American Academy of Orthodontia showing how much more predictable, how much stronger the bond line was when they put rebond between the bracket and the tooth. The bond got significantly stronger and much more predictable. So that's thin bond line principle. The graph describes it cleanly. The next slide is the same writing, but it describes when we're doing composite restorations, we want to have the rebond smack up against the tooth substrate, lining the pulpal floor. polymerization, shrinkage, and shrinkage stress. That's slide 4. No, 3.
That was 3. Now
3.
you're on 4.
Now I'm on 4, and I'm showing making from our instruction a periodontal splint. You want it smack up against the tooth and deep into the interproximal contacts. When people have a failure with periodontal splints using rebond, it's always, they don't have it smack up against the tooth. The composite, the luting composite that they're using to hold it on is too thick. And when people tell me about a failure, I'll ask them, is there any composite on the tooth? If there's composite on the tooth, that tells me the composite was too thick. If there's no composite on the tooth, it tells me their bond to the tooth was not good. The composite always sticks to the rebond. So that is the key to success for periodontal splints. Slide 5 and 6 are the work of Paul Lin, a dentist in Taiwan who teaches all over the world. 5 shows a clinical, the oral picture and the radiographs. In the radiographs, you can see in the before, let's say he splints the teeth with rebond and he's meticulous with his root cleaning. In slide 5, you'll see there's no bone around the 2 lower centrals. After splinting and root planing, the bone has returned. He regrew the bone. 6 shows a case where you see basically no bone, but I think in the centrals. And it's 12 years later with root planing and rebond stabilization, you can see a lamina dura in there.
That is just amazing. I mean, I don't even see this good of before and after pictures with Lenap. I mean, Lenap, you see something like this where, you know, severe perio has been reversed, you know, cleaned up, bones come back. But this is just even more amazing. I wonder if he splinted the teeth and did Lenap. Do you know?
I'm not familiar with Lenap, but he does basically root planing, meticulous root planing. Ray Yukna uses this for his laser treatment.
Wow, that is just an amazing picture. Very good.
And Paul Lin's picture shows it 12 years later. It's 12-year follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't ask for anything more.
Well, it makes sense on periodontal disease. I mean, I'm a farm boy from Kansas. I mean, if you went to a fence post and grab the top of that fence post and just start rocking it back and forth, it doesn't take long, and then you can just lift that thing straight out. So having instead of having, you know, the crown to root ratio being 1 part crown to 2 parts roots, once you're at 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, the tooth doesn't have a chance just from pure physics.
Don't knock physics. You can't argue with physics.
Was it Newton who said if you gave me a lever long enough, you could lift the earth?
Yeah.
Was that Sir Isaac Newton, or was that
whoever it was? It's logical.
Right.
You get a long enough lever.
Are you selling most of this for periodontal disease splinting? I mean, is that the majority? Is that the 80-20 rule of rebond?
I would say right now the main use probably is the instant bridge. Which is a periodontal splint, but the periodontal splint with a ponic in there.
And is the ponic the extracted tooth they just removed?
It's the best ponic you can get.
That's what I always like to use.
Shade's good. is good. The first bridge splint I ever did, I told her I have no idea what to expect. I've done this with teeth. It may work, it may not. I said it's probably just temporary. She was a youngster, 78 at the time, and she said she was just temporary. When I saw her last time I saw her 6 years later, that tooth was still in there, and the rest of her was just falling apart. The rest of her body was falling apart, but that tooth was there. I say the main use is going to become, though, within composite restorations. It should totally. One slide we're going to see near the end shows a shell of a tooth, where I stained some pieces of rebond and laminated it against the inside walls. So basically, you're building a fiber composite structure within that tooth.
And are you favoring any type of bonding agent or composite?
We recommend wetting the rebond with a plain, old-time, original, simple enamel bonding resin with no filler and no dentin primers in it. I don't know what's it. Dentin primers could be anything. They'll have bubbles in it, gas, and all kind of other stuff. And with the one-step system, something like 80% of the material is solvents. We have our own, which is a plain original bond resin, the least expensive thing somebody could buy. And by not having solvents, the shelf life is, we have to say the shelf life is 2 years, but it'll last for a much, much longer time.
And when we talked about physics, that's also a great rule of thumb on chemistry. I mean, in chemistry, they tell you every time you lower the temperature 10 degrees, a chemical reaction takes twice as long. So a refrigerator, say your food's on the table and it's 80 degrees in your house, you put in the refrigerator 60, from 80 to 70 it'll last twice as long, 70 to 60 it'll last twice longer.
Yeah.
So if freezing, chemical reactions are still going, it just takes forever. So all of those shelf lives, I noticed one of the people that are really serious, about dental materials, even their alginate is in the refrigerator, and they just a lot of people don't understand their instruments. I mean, you can't be a painter and not know how watercolors and oils, thicken with temperature. And I always cringe living in Phoenix, Arizona, when the UPS truck pulls up and they bring in boxes of this or that, and you're thinking, my God, in the back of that truck it's 140 degrees, and you're just wondering how damn long has my bonding agent been in there. But when I order Omaha steaks, it comes in a styrofoam container with dry ice. It's like, why can't my bonding agent come like an Omaha steak? All that stuff.
As I said, Pastor says, translated into English is luck favors the prepared mind.
Yeah, and prescriptions, everything that needs your medications, and everything should be in the refrigerator if you want it to last twice as long for every 10 degrees.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with rebond, it's not pre-impregnated. So the shelf life is indefinite. With the pre-impregnated materials, the shelf life is limited because it's cooking. And then with the pre-impregnated, every time you open the package, it's getting light in there, so it's starting to trigger polymerization.
Right.
So ours is unlimited shelf life. And as long as you keep it in the container we package it in, the plasma treatment's going to last.
Right on. So now we're on slide number 7.
Slide 7 is a strange case. The dentist called. He had this problem of a mobile tooth, mandibular, lower, I forget what, it's a lateral, I believe, way in labial version. It's way out there, and that tooth is getting banged on. That's constantly getting abused. It's so far in labial version and crowded out that there's really no room to get a a sufficient bond to it, no matter how well you adapt the rebond in there. There's just not enough surface area. So I explained to him on the phone, he sent me some pictures, and I explained to him on the phone, cut a channel in the mesial and the distal at the level of the contact area, and cut a groove in there, and cut a channel across the labial. Weave the rebond through there, and physically constrain the tooth from being pushed labially. And that's what he did, and he covered it with a little composite. Rebond hides, it's masked very easily, it's translucent, you don't see it. You can bend it any way you want through that irregular contour, and that physically constrains the tooth from moving. So again, rebond is a tool, it has no brain. If the user has a good brain, and you don't have to be a genius, if the user has a brain, you can do magic with it. That's an example of a problem solving.
Very, very good. So then number 8, you're saying the best simple but not too simplex text marketing BS detector. The New Science of Strong Materials and Why You Don't Fall Through the Floor by G.E. Gordon.
That book is used in the UK. Well, let me say this. I recommend that to every dental school where they teach dental materials. In the UK, this book is used not just to teach material science, but to teach the English language. It's written that well. In that book, there's 4 pages by John McLean describing enamel as a composite material. And I met John McLean. When I met John, I mentioned that book. His eyes lit up because McLean worked with this guy during the Second World War. And when you see the craze lines in the enamel, that's basically the principle of composite materials, of the weak interface that we're going to get to next. So that book, even if you're not scientifically oriented, Gordon can explain it to you. He's that good.
The New Science of Strong Materials or Why You Don't Fall Through the Floor by G.E. Gordon.
Yeah.
And you mentioned World War. You'll have to explain, how did you end up in the German army after dental school at the University of Maryland in 61?
I was stationed in Germany.
Oh, stationed in Germany.
A little different.
Oh, okay.
I was not in the Wehrmacht.
Okay, so that's funny how the mind works. Okay, so the next slide. So you were stationed in Germany. Where were you stationed at?
And about 40 kilometers east of Saarbrücken, west of Frankfurt area, near the French border.
So did you? Was the IDS meeting going on back then, or is that a dorm meeting?
I didn't even know what the IDS was at that time.
In Cologne.
Yeah, I didn't. I've been going to the IDS for the past 20 years.
Is that your favorite city in Germany, or not really?
Well, I know it better because I go there.
That was actually the farthest outpost of the Roman Empire 2,000 years ago.
Correct. And Colonia refers to the colony. That's what it was, the colony, Colonia. And one of my favorite restaurants is in Cologne. It's a Lebanese restaurant that has it's not German food. It's Middle East, as good as it gets.
Yeah, that Cologne is just an amazing city. You can still see the walls of that Roman Empire.
Yeah.
And you can get the best German food. And since it was part of the Roman Empire, you can also get the best Italian food. And I think a lot of restaurants are kind of a German-Italian blend.
They are, yeah. And I have a good setup there. The hotel I stay at is near the Dome, and I'd walk to the mess every day.
Yeah, like all the Germans.
Yeah.
It's only the Americans trying to flag down a taxi. You always know who the
And
Americans are. They're looking for a car to take them.
yeah. The interesting I learned is the term messa. That was the fair that took place after the Mass on Sundays. That's where the term messa comes from.
And I also want to say that I've met a lot of very successful dentists over the years that happen to go to Cologne. And Cologne is the largest dental meeting in the world every other year. About 110, 120,000 dentists go. And they bought some product from a company. Maybe it was from Turkey or Russia or Korea or Israel or Brazil. And they brought it back home. They couldn't get it. So then they decided to be the U.S. distributor of this company. And now that company, being a U.S. distributor, because these companies, they don't have the money to go branch out to the whole world all at one time. And America is a huge market. And I just can't tell you how many dentists I know that were turned on to some amazing product that they couldn't even get in the United States. I mean, and what's also amazing about that meeting is so many companies time their product release every 2 years. And the deadline for this new product is to debut at the Cologne meeting. So they can show it to 100,000 dentists, and just an amazing meeting. Do you like going there?
As far as a meeting, except for the airplane ride, it's as good as it gets. As far as a commercial meeting, I'm talking commercial. I meet people from all over the world who have been using my material. And a number of people from these meetings, a number of people are doing research projects, literally from all over. So I interact with a lot of different people. And, when you're interacting with people, you you learn something. You pick up different ways of seeing it. Again, I'm going to throw another quote at you. Pasteur said, not Pasteur. Forget which, the French writer, very well known, said, the voyage of discovery is not going to new landscapes, but having new eyes. So again, it's different ways of seeing these things. Marcel Proust. So when you listen to people, you get these new eyes. And everybody's at that meeting.
Why did you call it a commercial meeting?
It's not academic. Everything is in the trade.
Now, see, I don't know if I agree with that description, because I almost think what I see at the Cologne meeting is people have trust and transparency with the owner. Like for instance, a lot of people listening to this podcast are thinking, okay, is this a sales piece or rebond? Is Howard making money? Did you pay me to interview you so you could talk about rebond for the 7,000 dentists? And the bottom line is, no, you didn't. You're a dentist, and I trust you, and I believe you, and I want to hear about rebond, and you share your message. And when you go to Cologne, everybody wants to get their information from the company's CEO, the person who made the product itself. Whereas in America, is a very cynical country where they don't want to listen to the guy that owns the company. Like, they'll say, well, that guy's just selling his product. I want to listen to some third person. And that third person, I don't believe, ever knows a fraction of what the owner knows. Like, I have no problem talking to Dan Fisher about Ultradent products, and I believe what he says. I have no problem talking to Buddy Moppert, what he said about Renamo. I would rather talk to those guys than go to some dentist who's kind of pretends they know a little bit about everything, but they might not really know
anything.
And and when I talk to dentists from Germany and France and Italy, they want to shake the hands of the owner of the company and ask their questions directly with the owner. So I just don't know what's wrong with that.
When the owner is the developer, the inventor, the teacher, Buddy Mopper, for example, I've watched Buddy teach people how to use his materials. And I like Buddy. He's pretty direct. That irritates some people, but I appreciate it.
I love it. I love it.
And
he was actually the interview before you.
Yeah, and I watched him tell people, the reason you're having these problems, I'm listening to you explain it, is you haven't been using it correctly. I don't care what the material is. If you don't use it correctly, don't expect to get good results. I'd say this, for example, with fiber composites. If you don't bond those fiber material, those reinforcements, right smack up against the teeth, the resin you're using to hold it on is going to fail. That's just the physics of it. Straight fracture mechanics. And I've had problems with one of the problems I've had with other companies, I'm afraid they're going to give fibers a bad name. There was Targus Vectris, for example. If they don't use it according to the principles, they're not going to get the type of results you should get.
What was the story of Targus Vectris? That was the Ivoclar product. Why?
The Ivoclar. I believe their problem was in their technique, they didn't have an oxygen-inhibited layer within the system and doing different layers. So there was a debonding. I think that was the problem. And Ivoclar had lost a huge amount of money on that project. One of the problems, though, is when a dentist has problems, when a material fails, the patient is the one who suffers. So if it's not used according to the principles of that type of material, eventually it's going to fail. When stressed enough, anything will work to a certain level. I had a fracture, a part of my bicycle, just this past weekend. A casting failed because they didn't round off the sharp angles on it. And that's where the crack started from, a stress concentrator. Just like within a tooth. The way I was taught how to do amalgams, we used a perverted cone burr. And I'm going to call it a perverted cone burr, not inverted cone. It would put a sharp angle in the tooth. We thought we needed it for retention. And that's where the cracks start from, that sharp stress concentrator. So, everything has to be used correctly.
So you're now on slide number 9. Cook-Gordon mechanisms for stopping cracks at a weak interface. A, crack approaches a weak interface. B, shows the interface breaks ahead of main crack. And C, a T-shaped crack stopper. Talk about that slide.
Take that slide and look at the next one also. The next slide is safety glass, which is the weak interface. The crack goes through the glass, the outer one glass layer. It gets to the resin membrane, which is a weak interface. It's blunted and stops. That is the basis of a composite material. In the enamel, you have the protein matrix around each enamel prism. The crack is stopped at that protein matrix, and that's why you see the crazed lines in enamel. Perfect example of this. Now, other manufacturers will say, oh, they have a stronger bond. Their material bonds it stronger to the resin. Well, if it's too strong, you don't have the weak interface. And the crack goes right through. It's not stopped. So that's the key to a composite. In a dental composite, the crack gets to a particle. Dental composites are particle composites. The crack gets to the weak interface of the particle, and it travels around that particle. So that's the essence to a composite material.
Now, is there any analogy of the same industry, a different industry, like concrete people putting rebarb into the concrete?
I think with rebar, I think what they're just trying to do is just get a framework within it. I'm really not sure if they're. I'm not sure, but I think they're basically looking for something to hold it together.
And well, because your next slide number 11, you're showing laminated safety glass damaged. And what is your point in that slide?
The laminated safety glass is that weak interface. The weak interface between the glass and the resin membrane in there. And the crack is blunted there. It doesn't go all the way through. If that wasn't in there, the crack would just propagate right through the glass.
That's a very interesting slide. So slide number 12, fracture mechanics, Griffith cracking, fracture
wait
mechanics.
Wait a second. We have slide 10 showing a fiber stopping it.
Right.
When the crack gets to the fiber.
Right.
That again is from my mentor Vistaps Kabari. The crack, it shows a series of pictures of a fiber with resin around it. Fiber sitting in resin. In the first picture, the crack starts, it just shows the fiber sitting in the resin. Next picture, it shows a crack opening in the resin. In the next picture, it shows the weak interface between the fiber and the resin. And at the tip of the crack, which is called the process zone, that's where the stresses are the greatest, in the front of a crack. You've seen the classic picture of crack propagation. And the stresses are greatest just in front of the crack. So the fiber delaminates circumferentially. Then the circumferential delamination continues till it gets to a weak part on the fiber, and the fiber breaks. The next step is the broken fiber pulls out. And that's what happened with a fiber composite. My next slide, I think 12, is a slide from J.E. Gordon dealing with Griffith crack propagation. And what that shows, it takes a lot of energy to a crack. It takes energy, which is the ability to do work, to start the crack. Once the crack gets to the critical length for that material, it just explodes. That's what happens when you blow up a balloon and puncture it. It literally explodes, but you have to put all that work into it before the crack opens. When you flex a acrylic rod, you're putting a lot of work into it. You put a scratch on the tensile side of that acrylic rod, that's the stress concentrator, and it explodes and breaks. I use that to demonstrate strain energy, the energy it takes to open a crack. So that is a classic Griffith description of Griffith's principle, and Gordon describes it as cleanly as possible. What do I show next?
The glass fiber breaking and pull out.
Okay,
slide number 13.
Correct. That was from a study done way, way, way back when I got started by somebody at SUNY Buffalo. Brendan Griffith, I think. He's from Ireland. And it shows the crack getting to the fibers, and then the brittle glass fibers fractured and pulled out. That's that picture.
Very nice. And then slide 14.
That shows the ribbon lino weave and also the ribbon triaxial. The ribbon triaxials are greatest load-bearing material. It doesn't adapt as well as a ribbon lino weave, but for load-carrying situations like in edentulous areas and bridges, when you have intracoronal preparations or crowns, that's our material of choice for that. But our lino weave shows, it's hard to describe the lino weave to somebody. You have an axial and have axial and transverse fibers. I invented some questions, and the weaver told me I wanted a lino weave. When I developed ribbon, I wanted a weave that would be open and lace-like so it could follow the contours of the teeth, but once it was in position, it would be locked. And that's the lino weave. It's an ancient weave. With that,
How ancient? The Greeks or the Egyptians or the Chinese?
Who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know. I would say not that ancient. When were looms invented? I probably back then, but it's made originally to make decorative, lace-like structures. Within a year, I developed this stuff and got a patent. I wrote away to 6 or 7 fiber composite research centers. Somebody replied, who became my mentor, Vistaps Kabari. Years later, I asked him why he replied. He said, with that lino weave, it is a constant series of crack stoppers, which makes for a very, very tough material. At each one of these nodal intersections, where the lengthwise and the transverse fibers are twisted, literally twisted together, the crack traveling along that axial fiber is arrested. So again, looking at the fracture mechanics slide, you have to put new energy in it to start a new crack. So it's constantly eating energy. It's like if you're splitting wood, say it's a straight grain wood, and you drive a wedge in there, it just splits. When you get to a knot, it's all twisty and turny. You can't propagate the crack through there. It's constantly taking energy. So that's the lino weave, which makes it very, very effective. And it also holds it together when you adapt it to the tooth. So I think that describes that slide. Also, we consider ourselves to be specialists in designing. I consider myself to be specialist in designing the fiber layout. We call it fiber architecture. Our ribbon Ultra is our 3rd generation of lino weaves. By changing, So it's a much higher modulus and load-bearing material than our earlier ones.
Now on your website, ribbon.com, RIBBOND.com, do you have lectures of this on the website? Do you have, is there any information on there?
There's a bibliography of articles.
So it's basically articles. Do you have a lecture on ribbon, like an hour-long lecture on the use of ribbon?
When I give presentations, depending on the audience, it
But
depends
but
on
I
what
mean,
I'm.
over the years, you never got one like, say, a clinical professor at a meeting, PowerPoint or video or.
I have PowerPoint presentations, and it depends on what the interest of the group is. If I'd be showing something to prosthodontists, it would be different than what I would be showing to, example, Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry.
Okay, explain what that is to our listeners.
Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry is, let me ask you, do you know of Graham Milicic? Have you ever met
Oh my
Graham?
gosh, out of New Zealand?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that guy.
He's
Whenever I think of New Zealand, that's all I think about is Graham Milicic.
he is the master of doing this type of work that the Academy of Biomimetic Dentistry is interested in.
And minimally invasive dentistry.
Well, minimally invasive, and the best description I heard of minimally invasive dentistry came from a Greek, Cosmos Toledas, who said, minimally invasive dentistry is not removing less tooth, but keeping more tooth. It's a different way of saying the same thing.
Explain why you find that phenomenal. Minimally invasive dentistry is about keeping more tooth, not removing less tooth.
Okay. People come in with a shell of a tooth. You don't want to destroy that shell. You want to keep that shell, that enamel shell, because that will let you rebuild the tooth. Graham Milicic is going to present to us in Philadelphia in October a full-day presentation. I think you'd find it to be absolutely, if you can get there, it'd be absolutely fascinating.
Well, why don't you do you email him or do you talk to him on the phone?
I email him.
Well, why don't you email him and CC me, Howard at dentaltown.com, and talk about this meeting, and maybe that's a possibility.
I'll do that.
Okay.
He's going to be there, and a guy named Inakoshi from Japan. Inakoshi, who was the one who was with Fusayama. Inakoshi is the master of caries detection, differentiating infected from affected dentin. So if it's just affected, you leave it. Again, I'm saying you're not removing that. You're keeping more tooth. Just because it's partially demineralized, you don't get rid of it.
And that's why caries indicator is kind of troublesome, because if you keep using caries indicator, it's going to stain affected dentin, right? And you're going to keep removing stuff that doesn't need to be removed. Would you agree with that statement, or?
It's real. I can't say because it's not my expertise. I know a little, but not enough. I know enough to make a fool of myself. Don't get out of your field of try to be an authority. What's not your field of expertise I play it safe. But anyway, I'll send the email to Graham. I knew you had to know him, but he'll take one wall of a tooth, and you'll see a slide of a representation of that, and how he'll rebuild that tooth. And he's had amazing results. But, he has a good functioning brain.
Oh, he's so smart. And another one down under, there's three legends I think of all the time down there. There's also Jeffrey Knight in Melbourne, and there's Hien No in Adelaide. Are you familiar with those? Hien No?
No.
In fact, he got the largest grant ever from Colgate. Colgate's really the biggest toothpaste company in the world. In fact, how Americans say Kleenex, even though they're using a tissue, or they say, give me some cola.
Oh yeah, the brand name.
Yeah, in many countries around the world, the name for toothpaste is Colgate. They'll just say put some Colgate on that, even though they're using another brand. And he got the largest Colgate grant. He's a Vietnamese guy who ended up in Adelaide, and he's just, there's so many sharp minds down there.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. With Australia, I remember the time of the Monica Lewinsky incident. There was a letter to the editor of the New York Times taken from the Sydney, Australia newspaper. How lucky they were that they got the convicts rather than the Puritans.
Ha! That was funny. When anybody says Monica Lewinsky, the only thing I think of is right after that broke, I was lecturing in Warsaw, Poland, and when the taxi driver picked me up, he was so proud that Monica was Polish. He said, "Your president could have had any woman in the world," and he wanted a Polish girl named Lewinsky. And I thought it was just this cab driver. But then I heard it like 5 more times over the course of the week I was in Warsaw, so I thought,
hey, they were recognized.
yeah, I thought that was just so hilarious. So then slide number 16, simulated rebond, molar reconstruction, circumferential fiber replacement.
Okay, this would be an example of what Graham Milicic would do. It shows I took a dentiform tooth, made a monster class 1, kept 4 thin walls, and laid it circumferentially around those walls, close smack up against the walls. People have done this with a 0.5 millimeter of enamel, and there were no craze lines. Again, the closer it is, you're making literally a laminated structure out of that tooth. You've seen polymerization shrinkage causing crazed lines in the enamel. With this, you have next to no resin to shrink. So you lay it in there, smack up against the tooth. There's different techniques, there's different principles, but that's the general idea. This greatly, damn near eliminates C-factor. I'm going to be involved. I was in Tokyo for a pilot study in November dealing with OCT, using OCT, optical coherence tomography, to watch gap formations in restorations when you put in a highly shrinking composite resin and polymerize it. What this showed, when you lay the rebond smack up against the pulpal floor and polymerize that, and then you put your bulk fill composite over that, the gap forms between the rebond layer and the bulk composite, in a safe area. Without the rebond in there, the gap forms between the tooth and the resin. And we watched this in real time. The person who was behind that study is an Iranian, was studying and working at Tokyo Medical Dental for 12 years. Just moved to the University of Washington here in Seattle. So I'm working with him now. I couldn't have been more lucky.
That is amazing.
The fickle finger of fate.
You should get them to post cases on Dentaltown on this. You should get Graham Milicic and these guys to post cases, because on Dentaltown, there's the message boards, there's online CE, there's classified ads, and the magazine, of course, digital. But the cases are actually, we watch what they do. What do they do? And we have today's active cases, and that's just a hot feature. I mean, if you could get these guys like Graham Milicic and all your key opinion leaders to post cases, is that you would really spread your life's work to far more dentists around the world.
Oh, I agree with you. The funny thing is, to change a culture is difficult. You've seen that over and over again. The most resistant place to changing a culture is the dental schools, because the faculty is invested in the way they do stuff. And
because the guys teaching amalgams have jobs and they don't want to lose their jobs, so some other guy can come in and teach
they don't want to
composites,
change. Yeah, that's their turf, is what
right.
They know. And I finally figured out how to get some dentists to change, because once they know about this, it's hard in good conscience to continue doing things the traditional way. What I finally figured out is when these dentists treat their friends and family, now that they know better, they should be using these techniques.
And that's exactly what I'm trying to do with podcasts, because the one thing I've seen the most successful dentists do, the number one trait, they're always humble. They're humble to their staff. They're humble to the patient. They're always listeners. They're listening to their staff. They don't have to pay a $50,000 consultant to come in and listen to staff and tell egomaniac. They're listening to their staff. They're listening to their They're listening. And those are the same ones that take about 250 to 300 hours of continuing education a year. So when a lot of people throw dental schools under a bus, I mean, I think it's amazing they can take a kid off the street and 4 years later he's licensed to do root canals and pull wisdom teeth. I mean, but I look at the dental school graduation as nothing changes. You just still got to be taking a ton of online CE the rest of your life. And I'm hoping this podcast makes it easier, faster, lower in cost, higher in quality, because they're multitasking on a commute to work or on their bicycle or on the treadmill. And here they are in the old day to listen to you. They'd have to wait to their annual meeting or something and then close down their office, then go sit there all day in a convention. And now they can just get an hour here, an hour there. And I think that's why these podcasts are huge, because it's just a really low-cost, high-quality form of continuing education.
Well, it may not be the final education for them, but it's opening their eyes. It's making them aware. And those people who are curious will then pursue it. But you have to be aware first. And I think that's a real benefit.
Well, you don't have anything on Dental Town, and there's 200,000 registered dentists on that site. So try to get some of your key opinion leaders to get something up there, so they can see more there.
My son handles the marketing part. I don't do the marketing. And he's had ongoing battles with some of the other manufacturers. But it's not my gig to do the marketing, but to get people to participate. If I can get the forum open the door. And dentists like to show what they can do. They like to share what they can do. They like to tell their buddies. We have study clubs. They like to participate. The next slide, crack bridging. Again, if you look underneath almost any old amalgam, you'll see cracks in the pulpal floor. That's from, a lot of it's the Poisson effect. When there's old amalgams there and they bang down on the amalgam, the vertical force is transferred and translated into a lateral force, and it opens cracks. And we bridge the cracks. That again these are supported by studies. It was funny. Semabelli, a female from Turkey, did a lot of the original research on rebond, and one of them was dealing with bridging cracks. And I had a very fortunate experience. She was in town in Vancouver, BC, for the Academy of International Association of Dental Research. She was there the same time my mentor, Vistops Kabari, was coming through, going to Vancouver Island to watch the whales with his wife. And I put her together with Kabari. And they co-authored some articles. So you don't get luckier than that.
Well, we are over time. We are at an hour and 1 minute, so we're in a minute overtime. But I want to tell the townies that if you download the Dental Town app onto your smartphone, you can get iTunes or the Google app Play. But if you just search, put in the keyword rebond, I mean, my God, there are so many threads. I mean, on this app, I'm just scrolling down. They go forever. So you have a tremendous amount of threads that go. I mean, there's several in the year 2015, several more 2014, 2013, 12. I mean, it just goes on for years. I mean, I've been scrolling down. I'm down to 2009, Is there any before 2000? I mean, it just goes forever. So this has
Yeah.
been a major product for a long time. And I just want to tell you that I'm a big fan of yours. I think we've spoken dozens of times at conventions over the years.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, David, congratulations on it and just an amazing career. I can't believe you got out of dental school in '61. I was born in '62. I just think you're a wonderful guy. You're a role model on you're the healthiest guy at every dental convention. You ride your bike, you work out clean, you eat clean. You're just a hell of a guy, and I want to profoundly thank you for all you've done for dentistry and for spending an hour with me today.
Howard, I appreciate your interest and what you're doing, getting the word out, getting people educated, opening their eyes at least. And there is no other real forum. I know of no forum. So, and even in research journals, there's no letter to the editor if something is not correct. So yours is the forum.
Yeah, and we talk about every subject from A to Z. So it's just amazing. But we're out of time, buddy. So I got to cut you loose. It's 1 hour and 3 minutes. That's my brand's an hour. Thank you for your time, and have a rocking hot day.
You too.
All
Thanks.
right, bye-bye.
Bye.